Hi, this is Drew Tignanelli. This is our May update here with Michael P. How are you, Mickey?
Well, my allergy's not doing well, but I'm doing great. How about yourself, sir?
I'm doing fine and nothing to complain about. Tax season is over for at least the initial burst, and the rest of it is a lot easier.
Now
Six
in the
months.
slow burn.
Yeah, I think we have about 60 or 70 returns left, and I think we've already done 10 of them already. So we
Yep.
should be able to wrap this up relatively easily, as opposed to 400 in 2 months. you know, so it's a
Yep.
lot easier. Anyway,
So we've got
market,
some exciting things this month, right? Graham Ewing is doing a webinar on when to collect Social Security. I don't know the date of that, but keep an eye out for that email. And then, sir, I believe you've written an article to the same topic.
I wrote an article about Social Security and Medicare, because we get that question a lot. I just heard it today. Somebody sent me an email and said, I keep getting told that if I don't sign up for Medicare, I'm going to get penalized and so forth. And I keep saying, if you're over 65 and you're already working and you're with a company with 20 or more employees, you don't have to sign up for Medicare, et cetera, et cetera. But the other one that they ask a lot is, when should I take Social Security? And the article talks about the two strategies for Medicare. When do you have to sign up for it? And the other one about Social Security. And then Graham's going to do a full webinar on it. So you can read the article, you can watch the webinar, you could do both, or you could do neither if you want.
Yeah,
Hopefully you won't do neither.
I just sent everybody an article earlier today about a woman who was an American citizen, uh, spent 30 years living in Australia with her husband, and turned 65 and took Social Security, but didn't do Part D or
Part B.
Part B, and came back to take care of an ailing father, and then they wanted significantly more for those premiums. So there's lots of stuff to know about Medicare. It'll be a good webinar and a good article.
Yeah, I mean, you can go live in another country and they could have a national healthcare system that you could live off of. But if you have to come back to the United States and be a part of our healthcare system, you better have your Medicare Part B, or you're gonna pay a 100% possibly more premium
Yeah.
for Medicare Part B.
Yeah. So today is the day we're recording this, is an exciting day. It is the Fed meeting today and tomorrow.
I, I can honestly tell you, Mike, I didn't know that, and they irritate me most of the time, so
Yeah.
I try not to listen to them.
Well, at the time we're shooting this, they haven't come out with anything, so we don't know yet. This is you'll get to play maybe a gambling game on whether or not what we say people are expecting happens. But the sentiment right now is that they're not going to change rates. Economic indicators for the U.S. are very mixed. You've got some indicators like unemployment showing a really strong economy, consumer confidence has been falling. So there's lots of mixed things, but the biggest thing that they're looking at is inflation, and inflation ticked up slightly. And go ahead, Drew.
I mean, they can only affect the demand side of inflation. And inflation has two sides. It's the demand side and the supply side. So, they're being, in my opinion, they're being foolish trying to think that their demand only operations they do to try to slow the rate of inflation down is logical. You need is a supply side impact also. And the supply side impact requires Congress, and it requires, some well thought out strategies around the country. We don't have enough housing in this country, Mike. We during the housing crisis of 2008, 2009, builders shut down for quite a few years
Yeah.
after they overbuilt all those years. And so you don't have enough housing to make up for the demand. We don't have enough workers. We're not having the kids that we used to have. we need immigration into this country, but we don't need illegal immigration.
Yep.
We need legal immigration, and we need it abundantly in this country. And you can't hold interest rates in an inverted yield curve forever. I mean, it's just absurd what they're doing. You need to straighten the yield curve back out. The lower rates need to be lower than the long-term rates. Shorter, lower than the long-term rates. The
The lowers
shorter,
always should be lower.
the shorter rates need to be lower than the long-term rates is the normal yield curve. Right now, the short rates are up here and the long rates are down here. That you could do that for a little period of time. You can't do
We've
it
been
for
doing it for quite a long period of time.
I've been doing it for almost 2 years now, and it's destructive, and it actually takes away from the manufacturing side that can help to continue to minimize it. You need a logical fossil fuel policy. I can understand the climate control issues and all this kind of stuff, but you need a logical one that gets us from here to there logically, but
Yep.
that's not what they talk about. They go in there and they get on their pompous Federal Reserve chairs, and
I thought you said you didn't have anything to complain about.
I don't. Not complaining.
All right. Well, let me go back to kind of the narrative of one of the things I think it'd be interesting for clients to hear is, one of the two main types of inflation. So there's core inflation and there's headline inflation. And I think almost everybody living in the United States right now will be able to say, yeah, I can feel that difference. So core inflation is, all the commodities, goods, and services except for fuels and foods. And then headline inflation is everything all together. Core inflation is actually, it did tick up, but very, very little, barely ticked up at all. It's the headline inflation that ticked up because as a lot of everybody watching this video or listening, that's where you can feel it at the grocery store and you feel it at the gas pump. So
yeah, well, the gas prices were coming down. Now all of a sudden they've turned again. You got a lot of international issues going on that are keeping gasoline prices high right now. So anyway, it is what it is. We just have to deal with it accordingly. And one of the things we're doing in our portfolios is trying to think out a logical strategy that inflation is going to be much more persistent than people have thought for a long time.
Yeah, and one last comment on the markets as of today. The stock markets remain positive for the year, even though April wasn't such a great month. But one of the things that's troubling to see is in the month of April, we saw again stock and bonds traveling together in the same direction, correlated, not inverse to one another. So I believe overall, most bond markets are actually down slightly for the year.
Not down slightly, Mike. They're down 3 or 4% right now.
Right.
So
Exactly.
it's not a good year for bonds again. And that's why our portfolio months ago, we made an adjustment and we continue to adjust. So anyway, let's go on to that estate planning topics that you wanted to address, because that's a critical issue.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things I want to address today is mistakes in an estate plan that we see too often. So one of the things that people don't always realize is they'll spend a lot of time with an attorney drafting an amazing will with all of these incredible intentions for what they want to happen with their resources after they leave the earth. And they don't realize that the titling of their accounts trumps all of that.
Yeah, and then the beneficiaries trump everything after the titling. So
right. Titling them and beneficiaries.
You have two things that are more powerful than that thing you just spent $1,000 or whatever on to get written up,
So, what these things can be used really positively for planning as well. There's a designation, the most common is called transfer on death. And in transfer on death, whenever the person dies, whoever's listed as transfer on death, that's who gets the money. It doesn't go through estate, doesn't go through probate, just goes boom, right to those people. So you might have set that up 15 years ago. You go and you do a new will and you think all your new intentions are going to be fulfilled, but that hits it. So Drew, let me tee you up for how titling has implications on, has tax implications, the bases and implications of whether or not a trust is the beneficiary.
So let's say I have our stock and bond portfolio in my name only and I die, my wife won't get what's called a step up in cost basis, right? So it means that whatever the capital gains is, I still have to pay it on that. If we were in joint name, I'd get a 50% step up in cost basis. Let me explain that, Mike, because maybe not everyone understands this. So I buy Coca-Cola for $50 a share and it goes to 100. So I've got a $50 gain I got to pay taxes on. But before I ever sell it, I die. My beneficiaries will get a step up in basis to $100 a share. Nobody will ever pay taxes on the $50 a gain. And they inherit the stock and they only pay taxes on everything over 100. That first 50 just disappears into the grave with you, Mike.
Now, what's the exception to that?
What's the except? Well, if the stock were held in a trust for me, you
Well,
would.
I was trying to tee you up for community property states.
Oh, well, I'm not a community property state, but I do have what's called a community property trust. So if you live in Texas or California or Idaho or Oregon or Nevada, these are called community property states. There are only 9 in the country, but it's a very weird concept. So let's say I have that same stock and it's in my name only, but my wife passes away. Now, in the state of Maryland or Florida, you do not get to step up in basis if you're the survivor and the stock is in your name. But in a community property state, if my spouse passes away first and I'm the one holding the stock in my name, I still get the step up in basis. That's a unique scenario for the community property states.
Yep.
And you can take advantage of that through what's called a community property trust, but you wouldn't want to use it unless you have a significant issue that you have a very large capital gain in. That's when you'd want to use a community property trust. And,
So let me talk about another, flub we've seen in estate planning where maybe an estate attorney has explained the law side of things, but not the tax side of things. So some people, hear the term trust and they think, oh, that sounds like good. Sounds like what rich people do. That sounds like a good thing to do. And there are plenty of reasons for you to put an asset in a trust to protect from liability or to ensure that something you want to happen in the future happens. But there's also a lot of negatives to putting something in a trust. So at one point in the past, we ran into a family that the attorney had put the family farm into a irrevocable trust. And while that sounds like, okay, well, what's wrong with that? Well, here's the problem. The family's been on that farm for 40, 50 years. Their basis in it is nothing. And now it's probably worth a few $1,000,000. If they pass away, that trust is the owner of it. They aren't. So what they don't get is that step up in tax basis we're talking about. So if the kids ever need to sell it, they'll end up paying a huge capital gain on it. So this is why asset titling is so important. One of the other things that's important in your estate planning is considering your different types of assets and who you want to inherit different ones and what the tax implications of there. Like, Drew, why don't you talk about the implications of who you leave your IRA to?
Yeah, so we have a lot of clients that are charitably minded, let's say, and they want to leave some money to charity, a large hunk of money to charity. Well, instead of writing that in the will, we just put the beneficiary on the IRA for charity. Because think about it, Mike, if I have $1 million IRA, let's say my total estate is $5 million, and I have $1 million IRA, and I want to leave $1 million to charity and the rest to my 4 children. So I leave each one $1 million in my after-tax money. I leave the $1 million in the IRA to charity. And guess what? The charity inherits that $1 million tax-free, and my children don't have to worry about paying taxes on it. If they would have just put it in the will that we all split the $5 million up together, you would have paid a boatload in income taxes on that. You rarely see that with attorneys. They rarely think out the comprehensive picture and the tax picture. Because they're focused on estate planning. They're not focused on tax planning and so forth. I'm not saying that there aren't attorneys that will do that, but it's the exception, it's not the rule.
Well, let me cue you up for another scenario. Husband and wife, it's a second marriage. The husband has kids of his own, and when he passes away, he wants to make sure he leaves some assets to his wife and some assets to his kids. What should he be thinking about?
Well, that that's a difficult one too, because if you leave assets in a trust, let's say for his spouse, so that he can assure that when that spouse passes away, it goes to the children, that IRA asset in a trust is a big detriment. Okay. Now, if he leaves it outright to his spouse, now you want to leave it to the spouse. So
Right.
it just depends on which way you, because the spouse gets the preferential treatment of pre-tax assets, not the children. So you leave some money after tax to the children, you leave a lot of your pre-tax money to your spouse. But if it's not in a trust, Mike, you have no assurance as to what that second spouse is going to do with those assets upon their death. It's like I like to say, Mike, you can either have a trust or trust. You can either put the assets in a trust and have more costs and more tax potential complications, or you can trust that your spouse is going to do what you hope you would want them to do. But there's no assurance, even if they're the most trustworthy person on earth, there's no assurance that those assets are going to end up to your children.
Well, the situation I was intending to tee up for you was much more simple. I was just going for IRA money to the spouse gets to be rolled right into their IRA, and treated as their own, versus if it goes to
Absolutely.
the kids, it's going to get taxed a lot sooner. Kids might be working right now and have higher tax rates. So that's
But
just the
that's-
kind of the stuff you want to think about when you're doing estate planning, not just when you do the estate plan, but every year when you're kind of reviewing what's going on and your plans and your intentions. Those are the kind of things you want to talk about.
That's part of the problem with most estate attorneys, Mike, is they only see a client once, maybe for 10 years. And that's one of the benefits of working with a comprehensive firm like ours, because every time we meet with that client, we're reviewing those beneficiary designations. We want to make sure that we've thought it out as best we can each and every time.
Right, and that's a great lead in to just remind everybody who gets this video that Drew's written a great book kind of detailing some of this and some industry stuff and planning tips. Those, if you are a client and you think you have somebody who might be a good fit for a client, our core new clients are between $1 and $20 million of net worth, maybe business owners, maybe pre-retirees or retirees. We're more than happy if you let us know. We'll send somebody you think might be interested a book.
And if they haven't gotten a book, Mike, we'll send one to them.
We'll send one to you too.
Yeah, because I'm sure there's a lot of our clients that haven't gotten a copy of the book. So all you have to do is just let us know. We'll get a copy to you.
Copy right out to you.
And actually, I'll be in town before they see this. A few days after they see this video, I'll be in Maryland, May 7th, 8th, and 9th. And we're doing an event on May 8th.
But by the time you see this video, it'll be too late to RSVP.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you don't know about that. Come on.
Well, you can always call and ask. We have some.
Yeah. All right, Mikey, I think we're out of time.
I think we are too, sir.
This is Drew Tignanelli saying God bless.